Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I am Morris Merriweather, the author of Enough is Enough and the host of Straight Talk in Room 503. I thank you for joining me again for another session in Straight Talk. Today, we met here because of the fact that we have allowed public education to go to an all-time low. I'm standing next to the dumpster, waste management. We have allowed public education to be placed in a dumpster. Ladies and gentlemen, we must do better than that. Join me as we continue. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to join me and get aboard the train to improve public education. Stay with me this week. We got some topics of interest that we need to deal with. Stay with me, but just remember the train's coming and you need your ticket to get on board because you should care about what happened to public education. It affects more people than you think it do. It affects everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, stay with us. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad that you're back with me in the class of Straight Talk in 503. As I normally do, ladies and gentlemen, you know that I always mention what's going on in my hometown because it would not be right for me to talk about what's going on in your hometown and not talk about what's going on in my hometown of Jackson. Ladies and gentlemen, this week in my hometown, at the board meeting, our present superintendent decided not to extend her contract. She opted out of extending the contract. Ladies and gentlemen, when I looked at the evaluation of our present superintendent, and 9 members of the board gave low marks to the superintendent on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest. The average score was a 3.3. Ladies and gentlemen, my question is, how can someone stay in the system for 4 years, and this is her last year that she's going to stay and she's going to move on? My question is, what was the board members doing all of those 4 years? Ladies and gentlemen, they gave her an agenda. And then when she completed their agenda, and like just a few more steps from completing it completely, then all of a sudden they decided not to extend her contract. She had accomplished what she had set out, what they had set out for her to do. So as the previous superintendent, they threw another superintendent under the bus. In my hometown now, we got to start all back over, looking for another superintendent. Not the community looking for another superintendent, the good old boys and our so-called leaders that we put in office. They are now working on who the next superintendent would be that would help my wife and my family and my children, my relatives. It's a sad day in public education, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, Donald Trump have a better chance of being president of the United States of America than our children receiving a quality education. Ladies and gentlemen, I have hope that public education is going to get better. Let me tell you what the letters stand for. The H stand for we need to help students to be all that they can be. O is for others. That's help everybody's child, help others, not just ours. P is for people. We need to be concerned about people. God was concerned about all people. E is involved, evolved. We got to evolve people so that they can become all that they can be, all that God has for them to be. Put those letters together and you got hope. I'm not going to give up hope for public education. Perhaps you have. I'm not going to give up that hope. Let me tell you something else that's very sad that I found out this week. Ladies and gentlemen, you know we talked about the closing of one of our high schools here in Madison County, the inner city high school. I knew that they had bussed out 800 students. Several more had followed. But ladies and gentlemen, listen real careful, and I'm going to slow it down so you can understand every word that I'm saying. I was appalled. I believe in telling the truth. I'm not for white, I'm not for black, I'm for people. But ladies and gentlemen, it's a sad day when that high school that closed, and I was told by one of the school officials, Mr. Merriweather, you wasn't there. But I talked with one of the subs and some of the teachers in that school system. And I'm a board member. Let me tell you what I was told. I was just blown away when I heard the truth, but you need to hear the truth. We go through life a lot of times, some of us, and everything we always say, it's because we black, It's because the white people did this. Ladies and gentlemen, let's be honest. A lot of time we are our own worst enemies. And let me tell you briefly what happened. I'm told, and I talked to some of the students and the sub, so I'm not telling you about I heard something. I got on the phone because I knew I needed to talk to you, and I didn't want to spread gossip. I want to spread the truth. This is a class of straight talk. I called a teacher last night and was told that a lot of the students, African-American students, was running off the white students. And I said, well, how did they do that? She said, one day I was in the cafeteria and one of the white students went up and asked the cafeteria worker, can I have suckers? The lady said, sure. And when she gave it to the student, a black student ran up behind the white student and jerked it from him. Said, you don't supposed to be here anyway, give me that. And I'm told all during the day that black students are telling white students, you don't need to be here. You're going to get hurt. We're going to jump you. Get out of here. You don't need to be over here at our school. Ladies and gentlemen, the blacks don't have a school and the whites don't have a school. School is for all kids. I understand a lot of things go on because I remember I'm one of the first 10 that integrated our school system here in Jackson. And I know that the white students call me names. In fact, the name is the N-word. They hid my books and they knocked me out in gym and took me back over to the school and said that I got whipped and lied. But there was many days when I couldn't find my book. They hid my notebook, took my pencil, and the teacher did nothing. But ladies and gentlemen, two wrongs will never make a right. We need to work with our African American students as well. Not all of them, we got some other minority that's making us all look bad. The truth needs to be told that one of the reasons why the JCM school is closed because the good old boys took 800 of them out. Some of the white parents took their students out because they didn't want them to go over there. And then we ran off some telling them they don't need to be, this is our school. Well, the same students who saying this is our school, now you'll be going to school with more whites than you was going with at JCM. So ladies and gentlemen, we don't talk to our children. Organizations don't go in and volunteer at the school and work with the students. Also, I also found out that the two white resource officers that was at the school was arresting a large number of African-American students for disrupting the lawful assembly. I know some of our students cut up. But ladies and gentlemen, they know that when they put them into the judicial system, and once you get a record, most of the time it continues on. That's why that Correction Corporation of America is on the New York Stock Exchange. They're making money off of little black boys and black girls that are locked up in prison. And it all starts at our school. So if it's going on in my hometown, it's going on in your hometown. Blacks are blacks wherever they go, and whites are whites wherever they go. But I'm not going to stand on the sides of wrong. I'm going to always be right. It's a shame that went on. And that has not come out. You heard it here on Straight Talk in room 503 that African American students at the inner city school that just closed ran off some of the whites, and I could have told them in very simple terms, look, fool, common sense tell you that when we had all predominant black schools, we didn't get our fair share. And fool, if you run off the white students and we return to predominant black schools, they will close them down because they did not have enough students to keep the doors open. And so the deterioration of the building, the bringing of white police officers to arrest black kids, will not hire black males to teach. Most of the teachers there was Caucasian. We bought that on ourselves, ladies and gentlemen, because our clergy wouldn't raise the issues, wouldn't see what's going on. The organization wouldn't volunteer and go in and do their part. And parents sat on their Humpty Dumpty as long as they didn't have to worry about their child being home and allowed this mess to happen. Ladies and gentlemen, shame on you. Shame on you, ladies and gentlemen. Shame on you. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the board members who just happened to be white made this statement, and I want to read it because I think it's valid. Board member says that too often in this community that we give up on the children. Now, when I said this community, I'm talking about your community as well. This stands true across the spectrum. Sometimes the community gives up on the children. Ladies and gentlemen, isn't that a sad commentary? For every child that's born was a gift from God. But the community gives up on the children. Sometimes it gives up on the employees of the school system. Sometimes it gives up on the board. And ultimately will give up on the superintendent. Ladies and gentlemen, we can talk all day long about how bad the board, how bad the employees, how bad the children, the parents not doing their job. The question is, what are you willing to do? Ladies and gentlemen, a lot of you are just killing time. Time will also kill you in the long run. Ladies and gentlemen, we must do all that we can to make sure that public education survives. We ought to draw a line in the sand and we ought to say, that's it. You ought to join with me as the title of my book. Enough is enough. We are not going to take it anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, we got to do something. Let me tell you, you can do something, or God would allow some things to happen. I was reading this week that 85%, listen to me, 85% of the hurricanes that hit this country followed the same route of the slave trade being brought to America. Did you get that? That the hurricane also followed the same route that slaves was brought to America. You can't do wrong and right follow you. Now that we're here in America, we all are children of God and we all are Americans. I don't believe in African American, they don't say the white America, they just say whites. But blacks are saying African American. I'm proud of my descendants of Africa, but I've never been to Africa. I would love to go there. But I'm not an African. I'm an American. And ladies and gentlemen, we need to come together. Right now, I see a war going on between us. No way versus nevertheless. We have a no way attitude while public education is being held down. No way can we do this. No way can black students do this. No way can white people do this. No way. That's all we talk about. No way. I don't know about you, no way, but private schools are flourishing. Students are leaving the inner city schools and going on to homeschooling and charter schools, academics academy, magnet schools. And we're still sitting on the sideline talking about no way. But let me tell you, no way is in competition with nevertheless. I'm one of those nevertheless people. God is looking for some nevertheless people. Nevertheless, we can accomplish all we want to accomplish if we just come together and work as a community and say it is time now that we quit having superintendents that will not hire black males in the classroom. School system that's predominantly black being ran by people of the other persuasion. When I look at our system right here in Madison County, not one African American male is in administration. And then the one that is in the central office, he's interim, meaning that he can go just any day. He's not even permanent. And yet the community sit back, and on Sunday morning, everyone is in the pulpit preaching, the choir is singing, the deacons are praying, the clubs are meeting, the children are playing. and the kids are going to jail. And ladies and gentlemen, we're doing that. But nevertheless, God is looking for some people that is going to do right by him. So ladies and gentlemen, the clock on the wall says it's time for me to find an exit door and get out of here. Bear with me, and I'm going to come back. I got a little saying I want to leave you as we get out of this classroom of Straight Talk. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get real. Let's face our problems head on. Let's make a better life for our children. We are so busy making sure that we give our children something, leave our children something. Let me tell you what's better. Not what you can give them, what you can leave them, but what you can leave inside of them that they can make the journey when you're not around any longer. Stay with me, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate you coming and listening to me each week. But listening and not working to improve it is wasting your time, and perhaps it's wasting my time. But I'm going to continue to come to you. Stay with me. We're going to get out of here. Ladies and gentlemen, as I make my exit out, I want to begin to read from you from my book of Food for Thoughts. I got 3 briefly saying I want to leave with you, and I want you to meditate on it, think about it. The first one is this one here. Check this one out. Your enemies are afraid of your future. That's why they are attacking your past. Listen to it. Your enemies are afraid of your future. That's why they are attacking your past. That's why they keep bringing up what you used to do, because they know that your future is bright. Ladies and gentlemen, this one here, number 2. Your life is your story. Write it well. What you're doing for public education. When the story is read about you in public education, what would the story say? What would the chapters be? And how would the chapters end? Your life is your story. Write it well. Why don't you edit it often? Make some changes. I'm going to do better. I'm going to help somebody else's child. I'm not going to retire and just go home and do nothing. For I'm where I am today because someone took the time and cared. Every story has an ending. But in life, every ending is just the beginning. Now for the last one. Life is like riding a bike. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. As I conclude this week in Straight Talk, let's switch it around. Public education is like a bike. You got to keep moving in the right direction to maintain its balance, that every child gets a quality education. I am your host of Straight Talk in Room 503 and the author of Enough is Enough. Take care till I see you next week. Stay tuned. Call a friend and tell a friend. We need to think about what's going on in public education. Stay tuned to Professor Merriweather each week. Thank you now. We'll see you.